Alright, today we're going to be talking about how I would set up a brand new dividend portfolio with just $500. We're going to be looking at a few key principles to keep in mind, as well as what you guys had to say on the topic. And then after that, I want to talk about how my investing strategy and philosophy has changed over time. Because I'm now at a value of around 34,500 bucks. It's not huge by any means, I have a long way to go, but I've learned a few things along the way and I want to share it in this video. Okay, so when it comes to setting up a brand new dividend focused portfolio, these are a few key principles to keep in mind. So the very first one that you should not overlook is to keep it simple. I often find that when somebody is brand new to either dividend investing or growth investing, they go all in too fast. So I know when I started dividend investing, I bought like 50 individual dividend companies. It was okay, I enjoyed it, but there's no major advantage to being so complicated. It didn't help me to outperform the market. And the greatest hurdle that's going to stop you from outperforming the market is actually yourself, so buying and selling assets at the wrong time. And by keeping a portfolio simple, you're going to help to remove the human element out of the equation. The next one is to have exposure to both value and growth assets, because what I found is when you're brand new to dividend or growth investing or what have you, it's very easy to develop tunnel vision and become obsessed with one strategy when a good portfolio is balanced. The next one here is to have competitive returns with the market. Of course, you can have a focus on high yield or low volatility, but the main thing here is to have competitive returns with the total market. You always want to benchmark what you're doing against the S&P 500, because if the market's returning 15% per year and you're only returning 8%, then there's definitely some issue there. Maybe you're not diversified enough or you're too focused on one strategy. And the final point here is motivation. When you just start a brand new portfolio, it can be very demoralizing, especially a dividend portfolio. If I come to my activity page and I go all the way back to the beginning, on average, my dividend payments were only a couple of cents. Visa was 12 cents, Honeywell was 36 cents. We all know that reinvesting dividends is super powerful, but it takes time for that to manifest, and in the beginning, these are very small cash payments. And now, being that my portfolio is slightly more concentrated in ETFs, we can see my individual payments are a lot more. And to me, having these larger payments helps with motivation, but I'll talk more about my portfolio in the second half of this video. So that's why, in my opinion, especially in the beginning, you want to have a fun portfolio that's going to keep you motivated, because even if you have the best investments ever selected, if you don't fund your portfolio on a consistent basis, it's never going to achieve you anything. And the last thing I want to mention is I made this poll the other day, and it's titled, "Is your dividend portfolio mostly made up of ETFs or individual stocks?" And over 300 of you guys voted, so thanks a lot for that. And about half of you guys said that your portfolio is mostly made out of ETFs. 31 said mostly individual stocks, and about 22 said balance between ETFs and stocks. So considering this poll, along with the principles I just talked about, these mock portfolios I'm going to show you guys are mostly made out of ETFs because they help us to keep motivated, they keep it simple, they give us exposure to growth and value, and they are competitive with the market. Okay, so the first one I want to show you guys is what I call the simple split between growth and dividends. And here we just have two ETFs. The first one is SCHD and the second one is SCHG. SCHD is going to give you all the exposure you could possibly want to high-quality blue-chip dividend growth names like Pepsi, Pfizer, and Home Depot. And SCHG is going to give you a lot of exposure to high-quality growth names like Apple, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, MasterCard, Costco, and a bunch of other smaller names. So together, they give you most of the exposure of the S&P 500, but of course the advantage here is that you can adjust the allocation. So you can have a focus on more dividends or more growth and adjust it over time. And that's it. It's super basic, almost no upkeep, and the returns are very competitive with the market. The next one I have for you guys is a pure dividend ETF. So I know some of you guys don't want to have dedicated growth funds, and for those people, I would recommend a setup like this. I would have pure equity-based ETFs like SCHD and DGRO, and I would especially focus on these dividend growth ETFs like DGRO and even VIG. The reason I would focus more on dividend growth ETFs if you're not going to have a dedicated growth ETF is because these tend to give you exposure to some of the tech names like Apple and Microsoft. So that's going to give you a bit more growth and diversification, and funds like VYM and SCHD tend to not hold these companies. Now, this next one is a completely different strategy. So here we have the major holding of VTI, which is the US Total Stock Market Index. This is going to give you all the diversification you need. And that's followed by JEPI, which is a very high income ETF with over a 7% dividend yield. Now, it might seem random to pair these two together, but my reasoning behind this is JEPI is a very specialized ETF. It uses covered calls and tries to generate a very high yield. So I view it as an accessory to a broader, more diversified portfolio, and that's what VTI is being used for. So if you set up a portfolio like this, you're going to be following the market most of the time, but you're going to have added income characteristics because of the addition of JEPI. Alright, now the last one here is going to incorporate individual stock holdings because as we found out with the poll, a lot of you guys do hold individual stocks, including myself. I do like to hold the occasional stock. And this is the way I would go about splitting that up within my portfolio. So I like to split up dividend and growth assets. And within each section, I would do something like this. So I would have one major ETF, in this case DIVO, which is Enhanced Dividend Income ETF, along with a long tail of individual high quality names like Home Depot, Johnson & Johnson, and United Health Group. And coming over to the growth side of the portfolio, I do the same exact thing. So I have my major diversified growth focused ETF with a few individual companies that I want additional exposure to. So those are a couple ways I would go about setting up a brand new dividend focused portfolio with $500. I would keep it simple. I would have diversification with exposure to both value and growth assets. I would have to have competitive returns with the market while having a focus on yield in this case. And lastly, it has to be motivating. So that means I can't have 100 holdings that have $5 each in them. Focusing on a few high quality ETFs will give you that same level of diversification, and at the same time, each dividend payment is going to be more substantial, and it's going to feel like you're making more progress and thus keep you motivated. Alright, so let's move on to how my investing strategy has metamorphosized over time. So my portfolio is now sitting at around $34,000, and I've been doing this style of investing for well over 1 year now. And if I come over to this was my main portfolio for most of that time. I had 37 holdings, a dividend yield of roughly 2%, with very competitive total returns. I had dividend and growth assets, and if I click into one of these, you can see how I had this set up. So I had some of my favorite ETFs along with a ton of individual companies. And this setup was great and effective. I had great returns, as I mentioned, but it was just overly complicated. I violated this first rule of keeping it simple. All this added complexity wasn't helping me to perform any better than the market. So what I began to do over time was think to myself, okay, is Lockheed Martin better than having SCHD? Because the way that I began to think about this was if an individual holding wasn't above average and bringing the average up, there wasn't any point of holding it. So ultimately what ended up happening was I relied more and more on my ETFs for diversification and income, and if I wanted to hold an individual stock, it had to be because it was very high conviction and I believed in the company's future. So for example, AbbVie. If you research the company, you're going to find that it's very high quality, it's making more revenue, it's profitable, its net income looks good, it doesn't have that much debt. Overall, it is one of the highest quality companies in the world. It's a blue chip company, and that's why I used to directly invest in it. But now my thinking is a little bit different. On top of being a great company, in order for me to have a direct investment in it, I have to be knowledgeable about the company, its market share, its competition, and where its growth opportunities are. And if I'm being honest with myself, I'm not an expert in pharmaceuticals, and I don't know all of the opportunities and threats that AbbVie faces. Although in comparison, Apple is a company that I'm way more familiar with. I use their products every day, I know what the landscape looks like, and I can tell when the company's making the right decisions and moving in the proper direction. So in a nutshell, that's why recently I decided to sell most of my individual dividend companies and focus on ETFs instead, while maintaining just a handful of individual companies that I keep as a high conviction pick. So if I come to my portfolio right now, it's still split up between growth and income assets, but if I click into the income assets, we're going to notice how simple it is right now. I have Divo, JEPI, and my custom covered call ETF. And all three of these use call options to generate higher levels of income. And I've talked about this in detail before, but all you need to know right now is that in my opinion, in this current market condition we find ourselves in, I think options are a great strategy to boost yields. So essentially, this side of my portfolio is now dedicated to generating as much cash as humanly possible. Now, covered calls do have their downsides, but that's why I like Divo and JEPI, because they're a hybrid and they have exposure to equities within them. Although, of course, in addition to that, I have direct exposure to growth assets. And here the story is very similar. So I have my broad-based growth ETFs, VUG and IGV, and then here I put the individual stocks that I still own, and I recategorized it as convictions because that's now how I view this. And here I just have a few companies that I'm very well versed on, and I'm bullish on their future. But even so, it's a small portion of my overall portfolio. And after making these changes, I only have 23 holdings, and my overall dividend yield is over 3% now, and that's while maintaining great total returns and being well diversified. So that's my thought process behind all this. Let us know in the comments down below how you like to set up and manage your portfolio. If you're still watching and enjoyed, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. It's greatly appreciated, and I'll see you guys in the next one.